Welcome to Fantasy Football Today. Hopefully, you're celebrating a fantasy championship. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. It's Heath Cummings. That's Pete Prisco. It's Monday of Week 16, but we're starting to turn the page to Week 17. We got a lot of stuff to get you set for what's left of the championship week. Also looking ahead to maybe those of you that are playing in a Week 17 championship round, but also starting to look ahead to 2021. Here's what we're going to be talking about for the next hour as we give you some fantasy football goodness. We're going to give you Heath, believe it or not, as always, on a Monday. Some fun stuff there and looking at some dynasty options for 2021. We're going to go over the latest news and notes and answer your questions. Also give you some DFS previews for FanDuel and DraftKings for the Patriots and Bills as they wrap up Week 16. And again, we'll start to look ahead to 2021. We're going to give you our early quarterback rankings for next season. Should be fun with our top 12 options at that position. But let's go through some of the news that happened on Sunday and also some stuff that could be happening looking ahead to Week 17. And the Eagles quarterback situation, once again, a little bit murky. So Doug Peterson expected to meet with the media at about 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So we should have an answer for you before the show is over. But he did say on a radio show on Monday morning that he has yet to make a decision on his Week 17 starting quarterback. Now, he's kind of said the same thing every week since Jalen Hurts has taken over for Carson Wentz. But according to a report, Wentz was dealing with some tightness in his legs, so there may be an injury at play here, especially after Hurts losing for the second time in a row as a starter, and now the Eagles season officially over from a playoff perspective. So, Pete, what's your expectation on who the starting quarterback for Philadelphia will be in Week 17 as they take on the Giants in a must-win game for the Giants?
I think it'll be Jalen Hurts. I think it's one of those situations when you look at this team trying to build for the future. Why not play him? You know what you have in Wentz. Maybe an off season to regroup is good for Wentz. But Hurts, showed some flaws on Sunday. You saw it in the second half. He turned the ball over. He wasn't as good as he was early in the game. And there's the old adage, when you get tape on a guy, you can find his flaws, and they're starting to get tape on Jalen Hurts. So they got to curb their enthusiasm just a bit on him, but I think he will be the starter this week and let Carson Wentz regroup and get an off season.
Heath, we're going to talk about our top 12 quarterbacks for 2021, and Jalen Hurts is on that list as of now. Again, we're assuming that he could be the starter for Philadelphia next year. But if they start Wentz, and Wentz comes out and plays well, and we know the contract situation and everything that play for Wentz next year, will that change your opinion on what Hurts' fantasy outlook looks like for next year?
The only way that it would is if they started Wentz for any reason other than the fact that Hurts wasn't available. If they chose to start Wentz over Hurts, then I would have some confusion. That wouldn't really make any sense for them to do that. We need to see more from Jalen Hurts. And I thought, even if that was his bad game, 340 passing yards and 69 rushing yards, that's not a bad day for a bad day.
Yeah, except 2 interceptions and a fumble wasn't exactly what you like to see. So getting a little bit careless with the football, some poor throws, some poor decisions, but that rushing floor is certainly nice, and I'm going to guess he's going to be a top 10 quarterback for you, just like he will be for me against the Giants if he does, in fact, start in Week 17. The Rams may not have their starting quarterback for Week 17 in a huge game for them. If they win, they can get as high as the 5 seed. If the Bucs lose, obviously they're trying to just get into the playoffs to get the 6 or the 7 spot, but they need to beat the Cardinals. They may not have Jared Goff. So he reportedly suffered a broken thumb. Pete, we were watching the game. We saw him grimacing as he was coming off the field after getting hit, and he didn't look comfortable at all. So he tried to play through the injury. I'm sure he's going to try and play through it again if he can, but we know how this goes for hand injuries. We saw it with Drew Brees last year. He missed 5 games. What's your expectation for Goff playing this week? And if he doesn't go, it will be John Wolford starting for the Rams in that huge game against the Cardinals.
Yeah, and I can't imagine he will be able to play. I would be shocked, Jamie. That thing looked bad. You hear, differing reports now that it is more serious than they let on. It's amazing that he came back in and was able to grip the football and throw, although he didn't throw it very well. So I think they're going to start John Wolford. And for those out there who don't know John Wolford, I followed John Wolford his entire career because he was a Jacksonville kid when I lived there. And he's a smart, heady quarterback who knows where to go with the football. Does he have a big arm? No. Is he good enough to move the football in that offense? Yes. Can he get outside the pocket? You bet. So he's not Jared Goff. We know that. But he's more than capable of moving the football if they can run it. And that's always the big if in that offense.
Footage of John Wolford. Who would have thought we'd have that on FFT? Great job by our production staff there. Heath, if it is John Wolford, no Jared Goff, what's your interest level in playing Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, anybody in the Rams passing game knowing that Jared Goff may not play?
Very, very low. I mean, Robert Woods is really the only one that you would consider like starter worthy right now anyway, and I think you'd have to downgrade him pretty significantly if there was no Jared Goff. I would view Woods as a high-end number 3, Kupp as a low-end number 3, and I can find better streamers than Higbee.
Just a rough situation for those of you playing in Week 17 to trust the Rams receivers in a must-win game for the Rams if Jared Goff does not play, and they may not have what is now their starting running back that could be down to their third-string guy in Malcolm Brown. So, Pete, we saw it happen in the game. Darrell Henderson looked to be like a potential touchdown run. He gets tripped up by Jamal Adams going into the end zone. Malcolm Brown came in and finished off the drive, but Henderson unable to finish the game with that high ankle sprain. So, down Cam Akers, now potentially down Darrell Henderson. Is this offense even going to have a chance knowing that they're down their quarterback and their top 2 running backs?
Well, they'll have a chance if the offensive line can block because, look, Malcolm Brown doesn't make anybody really miss. He's one of those straight line runners. You saw that when he went into the game. So it's all about the offensive line. But, it's funny how a season can change on one play, and we were sitting there watching it live. If he scores there, the Rams might win that game. And then you look at it differently even if Jared Goff does have the bad thumb this week. And then Jamal Adams chases him down. They don't score, and the outcome of the game changes, and the flow of the game changes. So it's pretty amazing. They always say it's one play. That one play could have decided the Rams' season.
What's your interest level in playing Malcolm Brown this week with potential backup quarterback taking on the Cardinals with their run defense has been up and down? Certainly wasn't great against Jeff Wilson, the 49ers, on Saturday. But just knowing that Malcolm Brown's going to get probably as many touches as he can handle, where do you think you'll be ranking him, and do you expect to start him?
Right now, in my head, he's a borderline number 2 running back. But as we move through the week, if there's a few more starters who are not going to play through minor injuries, if they don't have something to play for, then he could get up as high as a borderline top 15 option, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 20 touches in this game.
Opportunities there, and you're probably going to figure that with the quarterback situation being what it is, they lean on their run game as much as they can, and we know that's been a staple for the Rams this season, that their run game has certainly improved from where it was a year ago when Todd Gurley was struggling at this point in the year. So Malcolm Brown, get ready to go because you're probably going to be the leader of this offense if Jared Goff cannot play. And then on the other side, just to give you an update, Kyler Murray suffered an injury on Saturday. He is expected to play. Just keep an eye on that from the Cardinals' perspective and what is a huge game for their playoff implications as well. Another playoff scenario is the Miami Dolphins, as if they win. Because if they win against Buffalo in Week 17, they're in as a wild card. But we're going to see what happens with the Bills and what their game looks like Monday night. But for the Dolphins, they're expected to go back to Tua Tagovailoa. Pete, after watching what happened Saturday, hearing Brian Flores say that he's going to remain the starter, but knowing that he did not finish the game, and Brian Flores saying, we have the ability to go to our relief pitcher, and Ryan Fitzpatrick, who has clearly looked better than Tua this season. Who would you start if you're Brian Flores, knowing the Dolphins need to win that game against Buffalo?
Well, who is Buffalo playing? That's why. You don't know. Buffalo might rest a bunch of guys. They might not want to play in that game if they win tonight. So it might be an opportunity for Tua to go out there and play against a bunch of backups and actually look good. So I would probably start Tua. And again, I'm a big believer in the future. You have to find out who he is. And these are the kind of moments where you find out who a quarterback is. He got benched last week. Now go out and respond. Go play well and lead this team into the playoffs playing good football. Because you use that draft pick on him. This is gravy. Whatever you're getting this year from anybody, and this team has been outstanding in terms of overachieving, this is gravy. You have to find out about the future. If he's not the future, you have big problems. Now, do I think he's the future? There are doubts. He hasn't played very well. He's been average at best. Can he improve? Yes. Should he play this week? Absolutely. They're making the right decision to start him.
All right, we'll find out. And if Buffalo wins, they're competing still to hold on to the 2 seed because Pittsburgh can still beat them if the Bills lose next week. And I know what you're saying, Pete. They could decide who they want to play if they want to win or lose, depending on how the wild card shakes out. But let's assume the Bills are going to play at this point. Heath, the Dolphins' fantasy options. Let's assume Devontae Parker plays next week. Who would you rather see as a starting quarterback for the Dolphins?
Like the Dolphins, the receivers and tight ends aren't as good with Tua as they are with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I would view Devontae Parker as a mid-range number 3 wide receiver in that game. Now, he may get bumped up a little bit higher if he gets a full practice in. Mike Gesicki is a borderline startable tight end. Myles Gaskin would be the one Dolphin that you'd be starting without a question.
going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Dolphins and with the Bills Monday night taking on the Patriots. Hopefully they get out of this game healthy and we get to see what the Dolphins can do against a good Bills defense. But obviously it'd be nice to have Devontae Parker back from Tua Tagovailoa's perspective, or maybe just to see Ryan Fitzpatrick play if you are playing in Week 17, because he's the better fantasy quarterback and helps those guys put up better fantasy production. Matthew Stafford probably not going to play in Week 17, dealing with his ankle injury that forced him out of the game on Saturday against the Bucs, and so it could be Chase Daniel because Detroit has nothing to play for. So, Pete, at this point, are you expecting Stafford to rest, and how would you evaluate his 2020 season?
Yes, I would rest him. I don't think there's any reason for him to play in a game that doesn't mean anything. He's a tough guy. He wants to play. You saw that on Saturday. He wanted to go back into the game. He actually taped it up and went to the sideline, but he wasn't going back in. That's who he is. I think he is one of the tougher quarterbacks in the league. Now, is he going to be in Detroit next year? That's the question. And so why would you play him? I wouldn't play him. I wouldn't risk further injury. I'd sit him out. We know what he can do. There might be a team out there willing to make a move to go get him if you don't want to keep him in Detroit, and that's to be determined by the new GM and coaching staff. So right move to sit him. How's his season been? Up and down. Not having Kenny Golladay has really impacted how he played, but I still think he can be a good quarterback in this league.
All right, Heath, Week 17, you have Detroit Lions options taking on the Vikings. Any interest in playing TJ Hawkinson, who's kind of struggling toward the end of the season? Marvin Jones, who didn't have a good game against Tampa Bay. Danny Amendola, if you're desperate. Throw DeAndre Swift in there as well. If Chase Daniel or potentially David Blau is starting, what does that mean for the pass catchers in Detroit?
As someone who lost a fantasy championship with Marvin Jones and TJ Hawkinson in their lineup this week, I don't really want to start Lions with Chase Daniel. You're probably starting TJ Hawkinson. He'll be a low-end, top 12 tight end. Marvin Jones, if there's no Matthew Stafford, is no better than a low-end number 3 wide receiver.
All right, so we'll see if Stafford does in fact play. He's played through the rib injury. He's played through a thumb injury, so maybe he wants to get that Week 17 game under his belt to say that he made it through the end of the year playing through this ankle injury. But if you're the Lions, you probably don't want to play him because, as Pete said, you don't want to risk giving up a tradable asset if he suffers anything further in terms of another injury, or obviously if you want to make sure he's your starter for next year, hopefully he's 100%. The Washington football team could have a different quarterback as well. They're hoping to get Alex Smith back in Week 17 in a huge game against the Philadelphia Eagles, Dallas Cowboys, excuse me. They're taking on the Cowboys. I get always confused with those NFC East teams. So Washington taking on Dallas in a huge game for the NFC East. Washington taking on the Eagles in a huge game for the NFC East division. They're hoping to get Alex Smith back, who missed the game on Sunday against Carolina with the calf injury. But if he can't go, it's not going to be Dwayne Haskins. It's going to be Taylor Heineke. So, Pete, what do you think the quarterback situation looks like for Washington in their huge game to lock up the division?
Well, anything is better than Dwayne Haskins. He was dreadful on Sunday. I mean, he just didn't look comfortable at all, and you can tell he doesn't put in the work. We know that's the case, and he threw bad interceptions. He was awful. And Taylor Heineke came in and did some good things. He threw the ball around. He was more decisive in his decisions and made some good throws. Had a touchdown call back that would have cut it to 20-13 with about 6 minutes to go in the game. I was impressed with him. I would start him. I think they're making the right decision, but the hope of all hopes is that Alex Smith can be under center against the Eagles.
And same thing, Heath. They may not have Terry McLaurin. He's in a walking boot dealing with that ankle injury. He didn't play against the Panthers. We saw Antonio Gibson come back and have a great game. But in terms of the receiving options, the skill players around the quarterback situation, how much does it matter if Alex Smith is back?
I mean, it would be better for Logan Thomas and J.D. McKissic if we had Alex Smith back, but I think we've seen enough over the past month that the way Washington's playing offense right now, J.D. McKissic and Logan Thomas are pretty much just starters, at least in full PPR. And you're going to start Antonio Gibson as a low-end number 2 running back. All of them I would like more if Alex Smith was the starter, but I'm probably starting all 3 regardless of who plays quarterback.
And you got to wonder how much Philadelphia will come to play knowing that their season's over from a defensive perspective. Fletcher Cox may not play, for example, so we'll see if any of the defensive guys are sitting out for Philadelphia, and Washington's skill players can take advantage of that situation knowing that they have a huge game to win. All right, so we have some scenarios at play here when it comes to fantasy and who's going to play and who's not going to play in Week 17. So let's show you the AFC playoff picture and what's locked up already. So, Pete, kind of walk us through this a little bit from who you expect to play and who you don't expect to play. And let's assume that the Bills beat the Patriots, so they are tied for the 2 seed with the Steelers, obviously having the head-to-head, beating Pittsburgh. But everybody 12-3 at the 2 spot, and then take us through who you think may be resting in Week 17.
I don't think anybody's going to rest other than Kansas City. I mean, if you're Buffalo, do you want the 2 seed? Sure you do. You'd rather have the 2 than the 3 because there's an opportunity that, a game late in the playoffs is at your place and not there. So I think everybody will play. And Pittsburgh's going to play. Buffalo's going to play. And, of course, all the teams trying to get in will play. The only team I don't think that will be playing, obviously, will be the Kansas City Chiefs.
All right, so Heath, when you're approaching this from your lineup perspective, do you agree with Pete that you're not going to probably play any Chiefs in Week 17 and play everybody else?
Yeah, I think so. Unless they come out and say something like, no, we really want Travis Kelce to lead the league in receiving yards or something like that, I think you have to assume you're not going to see. Now, what will be interesting is who's playing running back for the Chiefs, because they're already without Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I don't think they want to give Le'Veon Bell, who kind of looks like he's now their third string back, a bunch of touches. Probably not going to do it to Darrell Williams either. So it would be interesting to see who is going to play for them. But I'd prefer to start none of the Chiefs.
All right, so the Chiefs are the one that's locked into their playoff spot in the AFC. So everybody else could still be at play in Week 17. And Pete, you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, that Buffalo may decide if they win, do they want to play a certain team that could be the 7 seed and maybe lose the game? That could certainly be at play here if they want to avoid Baltimore, for example, or one of those scenarios of trying to avoid a team that's really hot or a team in their own division like the Dolphins. So most likely they'll play, but at this point there could be some implications that don't want to play in this point. For the NFC, the one team that could be sitting players is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but there is some things at play here that if the Rams win, they could still jump over Tampa Bay if they lose to Atlanta. And so if Tampa Bay does not want to lose the 5 seed, they could still play their guys against Atlanta. And Heath, I'm assuming that's how you're approaching it?
Yeah, that's pretty much. I'm just pretty much assuming they're going to play.
All right, so we'll see what happens there in terms of the NFC. Pete, do you agree with that it seems as if it's going to be the Bucs, the one team that could be resting players?
Yeah, I don't think they will, though. I mean, you clearly would like to have the 5 seed so you could go play the 4, which is the NFC East champion. And so, yeah, I think they're going to play to get the 5 seed because, like you mentioned, there is a chance they could lose out on that, so I think they play.
All right, so everybody in the NFC at this point expected to play because the Packers could still lose the 1 seed because the Saints and the Seahawks could catch them. So we'll see what happens there in terms of those potential teams going into Week 17. So at this point, for your fantasy lineups, the Chiefs, the one team that you could be concerned about playing some guys. All right, so we got a fun thing at play on the other side of this here, and that's with the draft picks, because now we see that Jacksonville has locked up the number 1 seed to get that top spot and claim the prize of Trevor Lawrence. So Pete Prisco, you've been talking about this. I know you're very tight into the Jaguars organization, what they're thinking about up there, and just how this could turn the franchise. So how excited are they in Jacksonville to know that Trevor Lawrence is theirs if, in fact, he decides to accept being picked by the Jaguars, if that's how it plays out?
Oh, they are ecstatic. Talking to people up there, it's like they won a Super Bowl yesterday. That's how excited they are. It's a generational talent. It locks their franchise up for the next 10 years being relevant. And you know what? Jacksonville is a lot like the small town in Georgia he's from. I think it works out perfectly for him. He's a low-key guy. They have their franchise quarterback, and I can't tell you that job is now one of the top jobs in the league. A, because they have him. B, because they have, right now they would have 4 picks, including that one in the top 44. And C, they have the most cap room in the league. If you can't fix that franchise with all that, you got a big problem.
All right, so it should be fun to see Trevor Lawrence going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then, Heath, what does this mean for the dynasty value of their 3 main options as of now? So we'll see what happens with some other skill players that may be signed as free agents, whatever they draft. But we're looking at James Robinson, we're looking at DJ Chark, and Laviska Shenault. How excited are you about those 3 guys, knowing that they're going to have a franchise quarterback taking the helm over what they have right now?
It's certainly a boost for all those guys. They all have little things about them that make their value really interesting. I mean, Robinson, obviously, the fact that Jacksonville doesn't have anything tied up in him, that always makes you a little bit nervous about ranking him the way he's performed. Normally, if you have a rookie perform as a top 5 running back, he's obviously a top 5 dynasty back. I don't think he's that. I think he's more of a high-end number 2, low-end number 1 in dynasty. Chark has been up and down throughout his career, but I do think you would look at him now as a better chance of developing into that high-end number 2 wide receiver. And then I'm very excited to see what a new administration will do with Laviska Shenault in this offense.
All right, we can't let you go, Pete, without a shot at Gardner Minshew. So now that Minshew is going to be replaced, how excited are the fans in Jacksonville? Or more importantly, how excited are you?
Well, they liked him in Jacksonville. I mean, look, Minshew Mania was actually a thing. They embraced it, but he can't be the backup quarterback in Jacksonville either. You know, for anybody out there that thinks he can be, he can't be. They need a veteran presence behind the young guy. I think he's going to be a backup somewhere else, and that'll be good for him, a fresh start.
Last chance. Last time we're talking about Minshew.
Well, last time, hopefully. Can we please, now that Jacksonville has locked up the number 1 seed, they did a fantastic job messing around with other quarterbacks all year long. Can we have one more week of Gardner Minshew? He'll produce like a top 12 quarterback like he almost always does.
Heath is still hanging on to Gardner Minshew for one.
I mean, he started this season beating the Colts, right?
Bad.
Let's finish the season with him beating the Colts and knocking them out of the playoffs.
He did get the one win for Jacksonville this season. All right, Pete, great job as always. Thanks for joining us here on Fantasy Football today. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, it's time for Believe It or Not. We'll talk about Jonathan Taylor and his upside for 2021. He's had a great close to the 2020 campaign. He's not done yet. We'll tell you about Taylor and more next on Fantasy Football Today. Here we go. Time for Believe It or Not, where Heath Cummings tells you a statement, and then he says, believe it or not. Pretty simple. I'm Jamey Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings. Joining us now, it's our buddy Chris Towers. Let's get right to it. Topic number 1. Here we go. Believe it or not, Jonathan Taylor is a first-round pick in 2021.
I believe it 100%. He has been awesome down the stretch. 2 touchdowns against the Steelers. Now has over 500 yards and 6 touchdowns in his last 5 games. He's not necessarily dominating touches, but there's so many running back touches to go around in Indianapolis that he's still getting 20 per game. Nyheim Hines can have his 10. I think there's a chance that Jonathan Taylor jumps into that elite top 5 pick conversation with his production next year. For now, he's a back end of the first-round pick.
All right, so you see Heath's top 12 running back rankings here for 2021. We're going to go over all of our running back rankings on Tuesday's show, but Heath gave me a little sneak peek about what he likes in that group for the first-round selection of, or top 12 running backs there, so first-round selection potential for him. So, Chris, let me throw a couple scenarios at you here. One, Jonathan Taylor's obviously been awesome, but he did that with Marlon Mack not playing the majority of the season after getting hurt in week 1, ironically enough, against Jacksonville, who they play this week. There is no guarantee that Marlon Mack comes back as your free agent, but if they sign Marlon Mack or they bring in another running back, will you still feel the same like Heath does about Jonathan Taylor?
I don't have him in my first round of the first round rankings. Anyway, I have him 16th, and the gap between 12 and 21 is negligible, so I could see him moving up there. I guess they could bring Marlon Mack back, but what we've seen in the second half of the season, Jordan Wilkins, I don't think played a single snap yesterday. He was part of that 3-headed split earlier in the season, and so I think what we're seeing now is Jonathan Taylor is the, number 1 running back with Nyheim Hines playing more of that pass catching role. Jonathan Taylor, I don't think he had 1 target yesterday, so Nyheim Hines is still involved there. I'm not sure where Marlon Mack fits in. Maybe they want to go with 3 running backs, keep them all fresh and make sure that they have depth, but I think they're going to move forward with Jonathan Taylor getting like 60% of the running back snaps moving forward, and I think that'll be enough to get him in that middle of round 2 discussion. I guess the question will be, can the Colts get an upgrade at quarterback if Phillip Rivers doesn't come back, and who is their quarterback if Phillip Rivers doesn't come back?
Yeah, obviously a lot of things at play there for the Colts offense, but I think it's going to be hard to keep Jonathan Taylor out of the first round for me. Just such a special talent, and you're seeing behind this offensive line. Remember, he scored 2 touchdowns against the Steelers without his 2 starting tackles. Left tackle, right tackle, both out against Pittsburgh on the road. That was an impressive performance. Could be a little bit better if they involved him in the passing game a little bit more, but still a lot to like about Jonathan Taylor brings to the table heading into his second season. All right, next topic here. Believe it or not, Ezekiel Elliott is still a top 5 running back in 2021.
I mean, we never would have asked this last week, but he came back from the injury, and he was once again a dominant running back. Over 130 total yards against the Eagles and 20 touches. Didn't have to worry that much about Tony Pollard. I don't believe it, though. The things that have made him a top 5 back over the past 4 years, partially it's his skill. He is a talented running back, but it's mostly been a great offensive line and a guarantee that he's getting 80% of the running back touches for the Cowboys. I don't feel confident going into next year he's not going to be around 60 to 70% like he was in this game, sharing with Tony Pollard. I don't feel confident that all of the Cowboys' injured offensive linemen are going to bounce back in 2021 and be as good as they were in 2019. So I think there's enough risk for Elliott that he is still a second-round pick, but I'm not taking him in the first round. I'm not ranking him in the top 5 running backs.
But, and Chris, I'll ask you this. Dak Prescott back, offensive line back, whether they're at the full strength, elite level players that they were before they got hurt, if Dak is at the same level before they got hurt, you saw what Zeke can do, and he's still not 100% with the calf injury behind a bad offensive line with a backup quarterback in this game against the Eagles. In the second round, which I agree with you, Heath, that's where he's probably going to end up going. Could he be one of the best value picks in 2021 if that's where he falls?
Looks like I'm going to be the new Heath when I have my rankings for 2021 out there, because I don't have Ezekiel Elliott as a top 5 back, but I have him number 6 overall. I could move him down to 7 or 8, but I'm mostly hitting the reset button on him. I don't think we learned all that much about him this season. Once remember when Dak Prescott was healthy, Ezekiel Elliott was either the number 1 or number 2 running back pretty much every week, along with Alvin Kamara. He was having an incredible season, and so I think we can mostly look, assuming Dak Prescott comes back, I think we can mostly look at Ezekiel Elliott and say, yeah, he's going to be that borderline elite or elite running back again. You know, I went through a rough draft of my projections yesterday to set up my first round of rankings, and I have him with his second lowest number of total carries for his career after this season, and he's still a top 6 back for me. So, I think the situation, if Dak Prescott is still really good, they play at a really fast pace. There's just a lot to like, and I don't think Tony Pollard's going to take more than 25 to 30% of the touches.
A lot to take apart with this Cowboys offense in the offseason. We'll see, but a year older, we'll see how he looks. You know, he didn't look as explosive when he didn't have Prescott, but having Dak Prescott back will certainly help this offense and hopefully help things for Ezekiel Elliott. I do think, though, you get in round 2, you're going to be thrilled about that value, or late round 1, like where Chris may have him ranked for 2021. Next topic we have here, believe it or not, Calvin Ridley is a top 5 dynasty wide receiver in 2021.
He is, and we spend a lot of time talking about DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson. I think it's worthwhile to look at what Calvin Ridley has done the first 3 years of his career. 3,000 yards receiving, 26 touchdowns, averaging 70 receiving yards per game, and he's missed 4 or 5 games over that stretch. So he has just been phenomenal. The thing that sealed it for me this year, though, we saw with Juju Smith-Schuster, he was awesome with Antonio Brown. Brown left, and he hasn't been as explosive. Ridley averaged 95 receiving yards per game in the games with Julio Jones playing at least 80% of the snaps this year. He's over 100 receiving yards per game without Julio Jones this year. He's a number 1 wide receiver in Dynasty, in real life, in redraft, in everything.
I'm going to ask you this question, then, Chris, you can follow. Is that something you believe if Matt Ryan is gone? Because there is some talk that they move on from Matt Ryan and bring in a new quarterback, as obviously they're going to have a new head coach and a new regime there, so they could get a fresh start.
I don't think Matt Ryan has been much more than an average quarterback this year. He's kind of, especially when Julio Jones hasn't been there yet. And so I would still rank him as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver.
I guess if it's a really bad quarterback situation, maybe. But I agree with Heath. Matt Ryan's not someone who's elevating an offense at this point. It's pretty clear that Calvin Ridley and especially Julio Jones have been elevating him at this point in his career. The only argument I think someone could make against Calvin Ridley as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver is the fact that he's 26. And when you look at, someone like DK Metcalf or DJ Moore, those guys who are 3-4 years younger than him, I think maybe some people might devalue him for that. But when it comes to a dynasty league, I think anytime you start looking past 2 or 3 years down the road, I think you're really starting to overstate the confidence with which we can know who's going to be good at that point anyway. Calvin Ridley should be great for at least the next 3 years, if not longer. So, yeah, he's an easy top 5 dynasty wide receiver.
It's fun to see how, obviously injuries played a part, but we said going into the season that, could the same thing happen to Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, that's going to potentially happen to Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. And I think you saw this year at least, Mike Evans sort of balanced things out. He's a little bit younger than Julio, but maybe things balance out a little bit for Julio Jones, for those of you panicking about him. So there still might be 1 or 2 good years left for Julio. Hopefully just at least 1 good season in 2021. But obviously Calvin Ridley's on the rise, and certainly the quarterback situation in Atlanta could determine what the ceiling is for Calvin Ridley next season. All right. One more here, and this one was just mind-boggling watching this guy play yesterday. He had 15 targets, and he was a disaster. He looked lost. But Jerry Jeudy, believe it or not, is a dynasty buy.
I do believe it. Listen, it wasn't just yesterday. He's had struggles catching the football for a lot of this year. I don't know what it is. It's got to be a little bit mental because he's played a lot of football, didn't have a drops problem in the past. He's still getting open. He's still an advanced route runner for where he's at in his career. I don't really buy that he's just forgot how to catch. I'm hoping he can take some time off in the offseason, get his mind right, come back next year. I'm going to try to offer some dynasty second-round picks, rookie picks, in this upcoming draft when people get excited about the draft, but I would be willing to give a late first for Jeudy still.
I think you're right there, but, Chris, we saw this season unfold for him. Now, obviously, Drew Lock's had some injury concerns. He's been up and down, had the shoulder injury earlier this season. But if there was an opportunity for Jerry Jeudy to show himself, it was without Courtland Sutton on the field. And now Sutton comes back. KJ Hamler will hopefully still be better or get better, as Jeudy hopefully will as well. Noah Fant is going to be a big part of this offense. Can Jeudy stand out among this young, talented group of pass catchers to the level where Heath is going to have him ranked as a dynasty option?
I think you're probably not buying for 2021, although I think there is room for him to improve on this rookie season. There's a lot of things that he does well. Like Heath said, he's a great route runner. He gets open a lot. The drops are only an issue if the quarterback's going to stop throwing it to you or the team is going to bench you. And I don't think either of those is going to happen for him. The one thing with Denver is I just don't believe in Drew Lock. I think he's bad. I don't think he's likely to get a whole lot better. I just don't think he's there as a passer. And so there's a lot to like about this offense. Noah Fant could be a top 5 tight end. Courtland Sutton, really good player. Jerry Jeudy, really good player. I like Tim Patrick a lot. I just don't know if that offense can live up to its potential as long as Drew Lock is there, unless he takes, a really, really big step forward that I don't see coming.
This is one of those teams I think you look at and say, how much does an offseason matter? Because it was a second-year quarterback that only started 5 games last year, new offensive coordinator, 2 new wide receivers, and then the guy that was coming back got hurt early in the season. So I think a full offseason, a healthy Courtland Sutton. If they keep Pat Shurmur as the play caller, hopefully that thing will have some continuity there. So there's a lot to like about what this offense can become. Obviously, Drew Lock has to take the next step, but so do all of these young pass catchers, Jerry Jeudy specifically. Catch the football, young man, and you will have a much better career and certainly a lot more fantasy production for us who will be buying into you. All right, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back and get into our quarterbacks, is Drew Lock in the top 12? Probably not. But what about these guys? Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray. Are they going to be the number 2 quarterback for 2021? We'll tell you about that more next on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. So we know Week 17, some of you are not playing in anything meaningful. Some of you are going to play DFS, but some of you are already starting to look ahead to 2021 after winning your fantasy championships with a strong Week 16 performance. So what we're going to do here all week on Fantasy Football Today is start to take a look at 2021 with our rankings at each position. So Monday, we're starting with quarterbacks, and here's the top 12 quarterbacks for the 3 of us. Next week on CBSSports.com, you can see the full list of all of our rankings for the 3 of us, plus Dave Richard as well. We'll factor in his rankings, and those rankings will be available on the show with his respective positions when he's on with us. So here's Heath's 2021 rankings. Just make sure you take it all in. We're going to spend some time talking about these. Some of the names that probably stand out to you is Aaron Rodgers, number 4, still being a top 4 quarterback, even though as he gets older. Obviously, Jalen Hurts already in the top 10 for Heath. Tom Brady still in the top 12, so there's some talking points we'll have there. And clearly Dak Prescott back at number 6. Chris Towers, his quarterback rankings for 2021. The name that probably stands out when you take a look at this, which we'll discuss, is Taysom Hill at number 10. So Chris forecasting that Drew Brees will retire and Taysom Hill will take over for Drew Brees as he did this season when Brees was out with the rib injury. And then my top 12 for 2021. I guess probably the thing that may stand out, I think right now I'm the highest on Lamar Jackson. I don't know if that's a big surprise. Not BC Jalen Hurts is in my rankings as well. And then Joe Burrow at number 12. So let's talk about some of these rank lists here and some of the topics that probably are most interesting to you. So the big surprise is we're not at all on the same page as who's number 2 for us in our rankings right now. And again, these rankings are going to change before we get to August and certainly once we get to the start of the season as free agency and the NFL draft shapes these NFL rosters. So we got Kyler Murray as a number 2 option. We got Deshaun Watson as a number 2 option and Josh Allen as a number 2 option. So Heath, I'll start with you. You like Deshaun Watson, number 2. Tell us why.
We've seen what he has been after he's been freed from Bill O'Brien. They're letting him wing it just a little bit more. They're letting him run it just a little bit more. And over the last 3 seasons, he's been a top 6 fantasy quarterback in each of those seasons. I just feel like we haven't quite seen over a full 16 games the best of Deshaun Watson, and there's a chance. We'll see. This could change. If they bring in a defensive-minded head coach and talk about running the football more, then I'll lower him. But right now I think that there's some opportunity for Watson to challenge Mahomes for number 1 next year.
I struggled with Allen versus Watson. Watson is 3 for me. Allen is 2. And part of it is going to hinge on is Will Fuller back. He's a free agent right now. What are they going to do to address that position? That's a big part of it. But I'm with you. I think the sky's the limit for Deshaun Watson. Chris, you're a little bit down on Deshaun Watson. He's number 9 for you, and you have Kyler Murray number 2. So defend those 2 selections.
Yeah, it's kind of, I wouldn't say I'm down on Deshaun Watson. It's just when you look at the running quarterbacks that are out there, you compare him to Kyler Murray, you compare him to Lamar Jackson, even someone like Jalen Hurts or Taysom Hill. Deshaun Watson doesn't quite stand out in that category anymore. He's a really, really good runner, but you're going to end up right around 400 to 500 rushing yards with him most seasons. There are other guys like Kyler Murray we're seeing who, has 1,000-yard upside as a rusher. I don't have him projected for that, but if he rushes for 700 yards and takes even a small step forward as a passer, which granted, that's what we were hoping for this season, and he has not been particularly good as a rusher, especially, after the first 5 or 6 games. But for me, the top 4, number 2 through 5, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Aaron Rodgers, and Russell Wilson, they're separated by 0.7 points in my season-long projections right now. So it's really close. If you end up with any of those guys, I'll probably just draft whichever one goes latest.
All right, so we'll see how it goes with those 3 quarterbacks, but I'll have top 2, maybe even number 1 upside with Allen, with Watson, and with Murray. We'll see how Allen plays Monday night, taking on the Patriots, how things finish for him. But he's just had an amazing third season in the NFL. Hopefully things continue to improve for him moving forward, as we've seen through the progression of his career so far. We got Aaron Rodgers as a borderline top 5 guy. Russell Wilson still in the top 10. So Heath, why still keeping the faith with Rodgers, knowing that last year wasn't great for him? This year was amazing, probably going to be the NFL MVP. And then Russell Wilson, as he's kind of petered out toward the end of the season, did have a 22-point game against the Rams in Week 16, but hasn't exactly been the best fantasy quarterback down the stretch.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried I was too low on Rodgers, actually, where I had him ranked. He's going to finish the year most likely as the number 1 quarterback in all of fantasy. He is probably going to win the MVP, and as long as he had Devontae Adams, I'm not sure anything else matters for Rodgers. As for Wilson, I have some concern about why it's 2 years in a row now he has struggled down the stretch, but he is, again, going to finish most likely as a top 5 quarterback. He's still going to have fantastic weapons in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett next year. I'm just going to bet on him bouncing back a little bit from this finish, although I'm still ranking him below where he's going to finish this year.
All right, so let's see which Russell Wilson shows up. Will he be Mr. Unlimited and cook again like we saw at the start of the season? Or will he be more of a game manager like we've seen a little bit too much in the second half of the season? I'm sure what the offensive line looks like, what the receiving core continues to look like. Hopefully they do have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf back healthy, and maybe add a third piece to that if they tried to do this season with Josh Gordon. But we'll see what the receiving core looks like for Russell Wilson. He feels like he could be somebody that people are a little bit disappointed with, but hard to overlook what he is as a fantasy quarterback when he's playing at his peak. And the same goes for Dak Prescott when he's 100% healthy. So we thought he had a chance to be a top 6 quarterback this season. Could have been as high as number 2 or 3 in some rankings. But he's had the ankle injury, expected to make a return at 100%, hopefully back with Dallas. So, Chris, you said when you were talking about Ezekiel Elliott, you're the high guy on Zeke. Are you going to be the high guy on Dak Prescott as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was on pace for he was never going to sustain the pace, but I think before the injury, he might have been on pace for about 6,000 passing yards. The Cowboys run an incredibly fast offense. It was by far the fastest in the NFL on a per-snap basis before his injury. They've slowed down since. But this is a team that's going to play a lot of plays. They're going to throw the ball a lot. They're going to throw the ball downfield. He has 3 incredibly talented wide receivers. Hopefully next season, 2 good tight ends, 2 good running. There's a lot to like about this offense, and I don't think that's going to change. Obviously, if he doesn't go back to Dallas, I think some of it's situation dependent, but Dak Prescott, he's a good enough runner. He has a knack for finding the end zone near the goal line. I just think there's a ton to like about him in that situation, and if people are going to be discounting him, I'll draft a lot of Dak Prescott.
Yep, hopefully he's 100% healthy and ready to go and has his full complement of wide receivers like we saw what they look like they could become. We'll find out if Michael Gallup does return, but having a healthy Blake Jarwin back, what CeeDee Lamb could be as a sophomore, obviously Amari Cooper as well, and then Ezekiel Elliott in an offensive line. Dak Prescott could be one of the best buy low candidates or bounce back candidates, depending on how you view him in 2021. All right, Chris, quickly tell us why Taysom Hill in your top 12. You're expecting him to be the guy for the Saints next season?
This is a bit of wish casting. I'm just going to put some positive energy out in the world. Drew Brees retires. No offense to Drew Brees. He's amazing. He's just not the super exciting fantasy quarterback he used to be. So let's get Taysom Hill starting for the Saints. We saw he can be a top 5 quarterback when he was starting. And let's get Jameis Winston over to Denver. And that would make me like all those Denver guys a lot and would move Jameis Winston into the top 12. That's what I'm hoping for. So I'm just putting positive energy out in the world. Drew, you've had a great career. Go out on top, win a Super Bowl, and let's let these young guys take over.
Interesting quarterback moving around there. So Taysom becomes a starter for the Saints. Jameis Winston goes to the Broncos. Sorry, Drew Lock. I guess you're out of a job, according to Chris Towers. All right, we got a game tonight between the Bills and the Patriots. Let's give you a DFS preview of this for FanDuel and DraftKings. So, Chris, take it away. What's your lineup tonight?
Yeah, so I'm going with sorry, I'm blanking on that. Okay, Josh Allen is my captain. I think he's the obvious play there, and I think Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. This Patriots offense is such a mess that there just really isn't very much that you want to go with there. But Sony Michel does sound like he's going to get the start. He's worth sliding in there. And then Gabriel Davis, the big play potential, the fact that I think people are going to be off of him. He just needs one play to return a nice investment here. So that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, I need Josh Allen to score fewer than 40 fantasy points so I can win a championship. So I've got to play him in the captain spot. I need Stephon Diggs to score fewer than 15, so he's my next guy up. But I do think there's going to be some garbage time for Jacoby Myers and N'Keal Harry, and then some field goals as the Buffalo Bills don't need to score anymore in the second half.
All right, my lineup on DraftKings, I'm going to put Stephon Diggs in the MVP spot because I need at least 16 points to beat Heath Cummings in a championship. So hopefully Stephon Diggs can help me out in that capacity as well. The one name that stands out at the bottom is John Brown. He has a chance to be activated off IR and play in tonight's game. If that's the case, I will play him in my lineup. If not, I have enough money to put Tyler Bass in as the replacement option, but I don't like any of the Patriots, so I'll just play Nick Folk. Hopefully he gets a couple field goals, as I do think this Bills defense will dominate the Patriots, and the Patriots are just playing out the string, trying to get to 2021. All right, guys, great job here on Fantasy Football today. We're going to take a break. We have breaking news coming back after the break here on CBS Sports HQ. The Washington football team has released Dwayne Haskins. We'll break down the Washington football team quarterback and the future for Dwayne Haskins next here on CBS Sports HQ.